Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to be able to speak to you about this incredible documentary. Maybe you could just kick off with a brief introduction. If people don't know anything about Dear Future Children, what can you tell us about the film?
First of all, it's a pleasure speaking with you. Dear Future Children is a feature-length documentary about 3 young activists from Uganda, Hong Kong, and Chile. And with this film, we're trying to explore their core motivations, their backgrounds, and also the impact that young activism has on their personal lives.
And, you know, you're only 22, you've already made this documentary. Maybe you can give us a bit of background about your story and how this documentary came to be.
Sure. I mean, I started filmmaking at a quite young age, and I visited many film sets as a set runner and worked on other projects as PA or set manager. And I got to know quite a lot of people in the UK, but also obviously in Germany and in many other countries as well. And I think, 2 years ago, the core team behind this project, we all shared the same fascination for young activism, for worldwide activism, and we just definitely wanted to learn more about it. And that was sort of the starting point. That was where our original motivation came from, and that led us to making this project.
And obviously, throughout the world, there are just so many different activists working at many different levels. I mean, there's a few that are so high profile, like Greta Thunberg, that everyone knows them. But then there's going to be so many others, who are kind of don't have that same platform. So how did you go about seeking out your subjects, and how do you decide which ones you're going to include in your documentary?
So first of all, during our research phase, we were in touch with 11 different protest movements all across the globe. And we were also in touch with many, other young filmmakers. We were trying to see, in which countries are already quite a few projects coming up during the next few months and years, and which countries are a little bit underreported, which movements are a little bit underreported. And then I think the most important criteria for us was that we wanted to feature movements, protest movements, which have a clear democratic majority behind their core goals, behind their core interests. And we also wanted to have movements which are quite different from each other, not only from a geographical standpoint or from their core goals, but also from the society in a way. So in Hong Kong, obviously, we have a city which is very experienced with modern protest movements, whereas in Uganda, for example, Hilda was one of the first climate activists there to found the Fridays for Future movement, and she really had to build this movement from the ground up, and she didn't really had any experienced society that she could count on.
And what's interesting about the documentary is, of course, you're looking both at the movements, but also at the individuals themselves. So what do you think we learn from kind of delving into the background of each of these people, not only about the movements, but about what it's like to be an activist, as a life choice in some ways?
I think, the cost of activism is different for individual countries. However, in these 3 countries, the cost of activism, the cost of saying your opinion could either land you in jail, could get you killed, or could literally destroy your own professional future or your family future. And I think it's very, very interesting to see how these activists, how these frontline activists are coping with that, with these challenges, and how they are finding ways to still motivate themselves, how they are coping with the loss of friends. I think one element that obviously connects all 3 of them is the shared belief that a better future is possible, and that this is something worth fighting and working for.
And can you tell us a bit about the sort of logistics of putting it together? Because obviously you've got kind of interviews with the activists themselves, you've got footage, you've got found footage. So how did you decide to kind of piece it all together? And what might have been some of the challenges and highlights of making the documentary?
I mean, surely when we first started the project, it was very clear for us that we want to cover all aspects of young activism, and that we don't want to, look away from certain aspects, or that we don't want to look away from the work on the front line, for example. So surely it was our clear goal to also accompany these three activists sort of kind of wherever they go. I think one element or one moment that is, had a great impact on us as a team as well, certainly was the scene where Ryan is visiting the father of a boy who died on the protest. We knew them quite well. That was obviously a very, very, sensitive topic. For a long time, we were a little bit unsure about how we want to approach this or if we want to be there at all. At the end, this family sort of invited us as a film team to join this meeting, this sort of breakfast meeting that they had. And that was certainly a very, very crucial, important moment, I think, also for the film. And I think, our editor, Daniela Schramur, did an amazing job because whenever she saw the material, she just always asked, is this serving our story? Is this serving the kind of questions we are raising here? Is this answering the kind of questions we are raising here? Or is that just unnecessary material that maybe looks really nice and is powerful, but just not really for our film?
And what do you think it is about this newer generation? I mean, I'd count myself kind of more on the millennial generation. So if we're talking more about like Gen Z, what is it that is making people more compelled to get out in the street, to attend a protest, being activists online? Is it kind of political, feeling politically disenfranchised? Is it something about social media? What do you think it's down to?
I think all elements play an important role, all elements that you just named. First of all, certainly I believe that many members of of my generation are, coming to this world and they see that their future is in real danger, either by, the rise of the CCP or by the climate, which is obviously threatening specifically countries in the global south. And social media, I think, helps to quickly connect to each other and to quickly understand what kind of possibilities there are, what kind of people are out there who are already doing important work and who they might be able to join. So I think all elements play an important role here. At the end, I do believe that the current generation is highly politically interested and also just quite skilled at connecting each other and quickly sharing information around the world. So for example, also, during the research phase, it wasn't that difficult for us to find people in these three countries who might be ready to speak with us. It was actually, we were able to do that quite quickly. We were quickly able to really get a full picture of what's happening there. We were able to speak with locals, with journalists, NGOs. And I think that is kind of defining for our generation.
And, what are your personal thoughts about the effectiveness of activism, whether that be protest, whether that be, online petitions, and particularly after going through this process of making the film, have your views changed?
I think it's the next years will be quite important, I believe. I think we are currently seeing, or it's currently deciding whether young activism on the streets, young protest movements will have an actual impact on high-level policy and decision makers. In Chile, they were quite successful. They were able to overthrow the constitution, which is a major success for the movement there. Obviously, in Hong Kong, it was a little different. Nevertheless, also when we look at Uganda, Hilda is able to achieve quite a lot there. Has quite a lot, small success steps. I think it's quite interesting to see where this will lead. I do believe that many of also my generation don't necessarily want to go into politics full time, but they see a commitment in protest movements as a more targeted, more effective way of participating in politics. I think that's a very interesting basic concept, and surely that has been there forever. It was always the case. Nevertheless, I do believe that right now we are seeing, a peak in protest movements across the globe. And it's quite interesting where this will go in the future.
And what do you hope the impact of your particular documentary to be? Because obviously it's eye-opening on lots of different levels, but what do you hope after people have watched the film? You know, could you say that one of the messages might be that the most dangerous thing is to be completely apathetic, that on whatever level you want to react or participate, you should do something. So, you know, would you say that's one of the messages, or what do you hope the impact will be?
Well, I think the clear and most important message that we want to send with this film is just, please listen to them. Please take your time and listen to the people who are actually affected on the front lines. There has been so much noise around young activism during the past few years, so many other people telling us about young activism. And, you know, there wasn't enough time, I think, to really listen to the people themselves. And that's something that we want to change with this project itself. And surely the audience is able to learn a little bit more about what's actually driving these activists, what's actually motivating them. And especially in Germany, during the development of this project, we heard quite a lot that, you know, activism is maybe a choice and is a nice hobby, maybe also for the rather privileged. And we just don't think that this is necessarily true. And I think that the film is a quite well-informed, however small, part of this larger debate evolving around young and global activism.
And would you say someone like Greta has both been an incredibly powerful and loud voice within the youth activist movement, but she's also been incredibly divisive, and, you know, people have lots of strong views. I mean, let's not go down talking about Trump, but, you know, there's other people that have lots of strong views about, oh, should someone so young be taking on the burden of being the voice of a generation? So do you think that has also kind of, you know, there's so many preconceptions perhaps about what young activism means, whereas maybe a documentary like this can kind of be a bit more nuanced?
Well, I do think that Greta Thunberg definitely inspired many other young activists and other young protest movements, because they were able to see how effective that can be. Nevertheless, I think it was a clear decision by our team not to portray the most prominent activists here, but to find people who are from the backbone of each movement. It is very interesting to see you know, statements of Greta, her thoughts, her political opinions, absolutely. But I think we are offering an opportunity to also listen to people who are just, you know, everyday activists, who are from the backbone, who are not really prominent, who might be a little older than Greta herself, and who are just, you know, driving this whole movement or these whole movements. Yeah.
And what do you think the sort of importance, or how does it feel to be putting a film out right now? I mean, thinking about the fact that we're kind of post-pandemic and everything kind of was on hold, but obviously the world's problems carried on despite the fact we're in a pandemic, but also with the timing of, for example, COP26 happening. So what do you think was important about the film coming out right now?
Well, I think, yeah, first of all, we had a clear decision that we want to have this film in cinemas. I think there were a few other, you know, alternatives, that we could go directly to streaming, or that we could have, you know, huge online events. But we wanted to see this film in cinemas. And we think also we just have a different vision for young cinema itself. We think that young cinema can be a place of, you know, political inspiration, of an exchange of ideas, where important discussions can take place. So first of all, I think we fought really hard to get this film into cinemas, and we now want to prove that also we as a young film team, that we are reliable also when it comes to the theatrical distribution and when it comes to telling these stories. We strongly believe that politically relevant stories like these three can find an audience not only in Britain, not only in Germany, but worldwide. And that's something that we are working hard to prove in the next coming months.
And what do you see the power of documentary storytelling in making an impact? Because of course, you know, all these messages, unless you're in that world, might get lost. So what is the power of kind of having a cinematic experience, of being, you know, living through the lives of these people?
You know, it was quite interesting. We showed this film to quite a few politicians in the German Foreign Office, for example. And this was quite interesting because many of them afterwards approached us and said, well, listening, reading a news article where it just says, 3,000 people in Hong Kong are being arrested because of the newly introduced national security law. That just doesn't have the same impact on you as one individual story where the filmmakers were able to zoom in a little bit, where you can actually hear and see and listen to the actual impact that a law like this can have on the people on the ground. I think that's where documentaries can sort of unfold their full potential. And that's definitely something we are trying to achieve with this film as well. It's just not the same as you would read, a news article or something like this. And hopefully the audience can truly connect with the three activists that we have chosen.
And not only can young people be inspired by the activists, whose stories you tell, but also by the fact that you were able to get a documentary made at such a young age. So do you have any advice for sort of budding filmmakers out there, aspiring filmmakers, about how they could follow in your footsteps?
Well, I mean, this was sort of my first feature-length film, so I don't want to sound arrogant here in a way. I think what enabled us to do this film in the first place is that we created an atmosphere for our team to unfold their full potential. We worked hard to protect our team, and we, specifically looked for people who have the same passion also for young activism, who just definitely wanted to tell this story. We had to work with a very limited budget. It was financed without any major TV channels or major funding institutions. So we just did it on our own. But because we all just really wanted to make this film, this enabled us to make this in the first place. So I think if I can give some advice, it would just be, if you want to do a project like this, start with building a really, really strong team around you. And again, also, this film is not a film by Franz Böhm. This is a people-powered production where all of us, including obviously the filmmakers in Hong Kong and Uganda and Chile who advised us, all of us played an incredibly important role here.
And finally, can you tell us what you might be doing next? Have you got another documentary in the pipeline, or what's going to be your next project?
Yeah, we have actually a fictional feature-length film in development right now with sort of the same core team that we worked on Dear Future Children as well. We'll be telling the true story of a very brave journalist who is exploring and uncovering a very current human catastrophe in a way. And we are quite excited to get working on it. Amazing.
Well, I can't wait to see that one as well, and hope lots of people can come and see your documentary in the cinema, because I know it's coming out. Is it this week? Next week?
Next week, exactly.
Next week, yeah. Amazing. Well, thanks so much for your time. It was so lovely to speak to you. Thanks so much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Franz. Bye.